Picture this, your aging parent insists on living life their way. They still want to cook, garden, maybe even drive short distances, but every instinct in you screams that's not safe. As families, we're often told that protecting our loved ones means controlling every risk. But what if true care means doing the opposite? What if the greatest gift we can give our parents is the freedom to keep being themselves, even if it comes with a little risk? Hi, I'm Dale Corpus, a senior transition specialist and real estate expert based in the San Francisco Bay Area. As part of the sandwich generation, I know how hard it is to balance raising kids while caring for aging parents. I created this podcast, Simplify Senior Transitions, to make those conversations easier. My promise to you, every episode brings real stories, practical tools, and expert insights so you and your loved ones can move forward with confidence instead of stress. Today, I'm joined by Reginato, a certified geriatric care manager, gerontologist, and owner of Living Ideas for Elders. Kira has spent decades helping families navigate complex aging decisions with compassion and creativity. She's a teacher, author, and former radio host who believes in preserving dignity and independence for older adults, even when that means taking a few risks. In this conversation, we're exploring a powerful idea she calls the right to folly. We'll discuss how families can balance safety and freedom, why corporate care is changing the landscape of aging, and how to create a care plan that honors both protection and personhood. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast, where we help families navigate senior living, real estate, and everything in between. Hosted by Senior Transition Specialist Dale Corpus, this show brings you expert insights, real solutions, and stress-free strategies to make senior transitions simple. Ready to dive in? Let's go.
And we're back, everybody. Kira, welcome to the show today. How are you?
I'm well. I'm really looking forward to this, and I really appreciate that you're tackling this topic. I think we'll have fun. My main goal is to decrease the cortisol that is coursing through the systems of the adult children and their parents, frankly.
Well, hey, that's a great way to put it. I'm 100% excited about this, so let's just jump right in. First off, how did your journey into elder care and gerontology even begin?
You know, I knew I wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
Obviously, I knew, and it didn't turn out, but I knew I wanted to be a doctor of older adults. They call it a
Okay.
geriatrician, and it's because I love my grandma. I
Yeah.
had a special relationship with my grandma, and people said, "Oh, you're so good with kids. You should be a pediatrician." And I'm like, nope. I knew older adults is what I wanted to work with. And here I am. I graduated in 85. It's now 2025. I've been doing this a long time, and I just love older adults. But it was
Yeah.
Grandma Isabel, that got me all started.
Yeah, I know you've been obviously in this field for decades.
Yeah.
What first drew you to care management as a career then?
They did really have something that I knew was called care management, but I ended up
Yeah.
working for the Masons in
Okay.
California. They are a fraternal organization, and they had a care management program. It was helping
Yeah.
older adults, older Masons, wives and widows in California. So they asked me to call on people in person as well
Yeah.
as over the phone who actually wanted to stay in their home and not move to one of their senior homes in California. And they
Okay.
ended up having a foundation that would give money to help people stay right where they were. And that
Mhm.
was the beginning. I was there for 11 years and learned about resources statewide for older adults, how to talk
Okay.
with families, and that just informed going forward.
Okay. Now, you introduced the concept of right to folly and help families think it. What does that phrase mean?
In a nutshell, the right to make dopey decisions. And I think I learned it from Dr. Bill Thomas, and he is a
Okay.
geriatrician. He is a doctor who works with older adults. And gosh, maybe back in the 90s, he talked about people having the right to make unwise or foolish decisions. And he was worried because he saw in assisted living and skilled nursing facilities that those institutions would strip individuals of that right. because they were enforcing rules and basically removing a person's autonomy. And that was really hindering the person to live freely and, frankly, make their own mistakes, right? They were in this box where they were supposed to not make any more mistakes. And he's like, is there the right to folly? Is there okay for people who are in an institution to make mistakes? And I started to think about that more broadly and bring it into really if people are in their own homes, should they have the liberty to make their own choices, even if those might lead to negative outcomes?
Why do you believe it's important for older adults to be allowed to take risks?
I love that wording, allowed.
Yeah.
That's something we use with our kids. I mean, I don't mean to
Mhm.
be contrary, but like I allow my granddaughter to do X or Y. That's not a term we really should be using with adults. Once we're 18, we actually get to do whatever we want, right?
Right.
So that wording perfectly encapsulates how the majority of people feel because they want to control their parents and try to make them safe. So I kind of argue, do we need to let them just live their lives and help
Yeah.
guide some healthy decisions? Let's say I'm 79. I'm not yet. Let's say I'm diabetic and I'm having wine and crackers as we do this podcast.
Yeah.
Well, I, as a gerontologist, know that the current recommendation is no wine after 65. So I have 3 more years to drink. And those with diabetes are supposed to avoid alcohol, carbs, the sugar in the wine. So is it a healthy thing for me to do? No. My daughter's a nurse. What would she say? Mom, you should not be having wine at 9 in the morning. And I would say, I'm an adult. I get to do
Mhm.
these unhealthy things. I'm exercising my right to folly. You might not like it.
Okay.
It might not even be a good decision, but really, I'm still in charge of myself. Does that make
Now,
sense?
that does. Yeah. Let's elaborate even more with the story. Can you share a story where a family struggled to balance safety and independence and how you helped?
I actually have a family where the wife wanted the husband who did have dementia. And I'm just going to say, too, I think a lot of this right to folly comes up more when a person has a change in their brain, more
Okay.
than if they're just 80. So this husband had dementia and he loved to take walks, and she wanted him to be able to take walks. I know that the risk for getting lost or for wandering is really high when you have
Mhm.
Alzheimer's disease. It's about
Right.
60%. And when a person gets lost, the family gets mad because they're worried, but ultimately you're creating a ton of stress in that older adult who got lost, whether they end up driving for hours and hours because they don't know how to get back home. That's stressful to them and frightening as much as it is to the ones at home worrying. So, I thought, why don't we get a tile, which is a flat sort of credit card looking device,
Yeah.
activated and put into the spouse's wallet? He always took his wallet when he walked, and he also always took his keys, although the key for the car was off the keychain, and put an air tag on the keychain. And
Okay.
that way, the wife could find him or family member if they needed to. He didn't take a cell phone, so we couldn't do Find My Friends. I suggested we get a companion from a home care company that could take him on walks, take him to the park, go on outings, grab a lunch. So it gave the wife some respite, but allowed him to have some safe autonomy. He unfortunately started to get up at night and pack and leave. And the wife reported to me he left in the middle of the night. I didn't know he left. I said, okay, we're going to step it up. And we got an alarm that we put by the door. And when it was triggered with his walking by it, she could hear it in her bedroom and get up and redirect. Unfortunately, he was able to leave when the alarm wasn't on because it wasn't on in the day. And so we got a licensed contractor to actually put a couple of those little latching, easy
Yeah.
to lock, confounding locks on the front door, put one at
Yeah.
the top, and we put one at the bottom, and we put a pole in the sliding glass door. And we put a
Hmm.
black mat in front of both doors because sometimes a person with Alzheimer's disease will perceive that as a hole and they won't walk over it. So, we put a lock on the outside gate so that if he happened to get out in the backyard, he couldn't get onto the street. So we're trying to balance keeping a person safe at home while they have dementia, but
Yeah.
honoring their independence. So that's just like a small example of some modalities a care manager can put in place.
Yeah, I can imagine where adult children, sometimes they might not be as okay with it. They might be weirded out by some of the independence for their parents. So, how do you help adult children reframe their mindset from control to acceptance or letting up a bit?
One of the things I use is asking them who their parent was their whole life. Because if the person's been a risk taker, that needs to factor in because they're probably okay with doing risky stuff because they've done it their whole life. I have a
Hmm.
client who told me that she likes to get up on her roof and look at the neighborhood from a different view. She's
Hmm.
perfectly able to do that. Now, is her family happy she's doing that? No. Is there a risk that she can fall off the roof? Yeah. But you know what? She's been doing it for decades. So, unless we have somebody dogging her every step, she may think to do that and incur that risk. My mother is extremely fearful. You told me the other day she always sits and watches TV in this one sofa. But if it's a big
Yeah.
windstorm, she literally changes her seat because she's afraid if a huge tree came down on her, she'd be smushed like a bug.
Okay.
So,
Mhm.
very different personalities of how they view risk, right? So, I asked the child, who is your parent or who has your
Mhm.
parent been? Because that can help inform how much to keep them safe. My lady who
Yeah.
goes on the roof has a son who really wants her a lot safer, and he wants to wrap her in bubble wrap if he could. And she said, "I don't wanna be wrapped in bubble wrap. That's not me." And I'm like, "It isn't. My mother would
Right.
be happy to be wrapped in bubble wrap. This client, not so much." So I think that helps people go, "Oh, yeah." And I also ask the adult child, another modality I'll use is to be in the parent's shoes because that helps them go, oh, how would I feel if I couldn't drive anymore? Wow, I drive 4 times a day. This is how I'm living my
Mhm.
life. So sometimes asking them to step back and be in the parent's shoes. And I think for clinicians, it's a great thing to do too. Here's what you should do,
Mhm.
Mrs. Jones, when you get out of the hospital. This, that. Is it realistic? Is it something you would actually do in practice? So those are 2 things that I think help the children take a step back.
That all makes sense. Now, let's segue into autonomy versus safety in real life. What are some of the most common situations where families overprotect aging parents?
Well, I think the number one thing they do is they move their parent. I think
Okay.
they see that the person's not safe and they immediately think assisted living. They think if they're at home, maybe doing nanny cams. And they also start to nag their parents a lot to do stuff or to not do stuff. And I think ultimately it's trying to make them healthier. I don't think it
Hmm.
comes from a negative place. But I also
Right.
see a lot of adult children love telling their parents what to do now. And they'll talk about, I'm the parent now and they're the child. And in gerontology, we don't say that. They're still the parent. They may have changed capacity or changed mobility, but that power dynamic, I hope that you're not the parent now. I hope
Hmm.
that the power of being in charge and forcing your parent to change isn't your driving force, because nobody
Right.
died and made you the decision maker. The person should still be allowed to make as many decisions as they can make, including dopey ones, right? But I think historically, if your dad has made poor decisions, this is a time a kid thinks that they can step in and get some purchase and make their dad healthier. They can stop him eating bad foods. They can stop him from drinking or gambling or whatever it is. But rarely does it work because we're up against a pattern and a habit. And it's really hard to make. And the
Right.
parent may not want to change. So you're actually fracturing your relationship by nagging them to death. Did you take your meds? Did you take your meds? Did you take your meds? Did you do this? Did you do that? And they're at them all the time.
Right.
And I want kids to step back and think, okay, what are the hills we need to die on? No matter what age a person is, the takeaway should be that they're still human beings and they do have rights. If somebody's at home and you don't think they should be driving, maybe we can arrange for rides through a company like GoGo Grandparent, which is an
Mm-hmm.
arm of Uber and Lyft that works with older adults and disabled population. Maybe we can
Mm-hmm.
bring in some home care to be their companion. Maybe we can call
Mm-hmm.
in the Safe Driver program to discuss giving up the car keys.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want to break your relationship. And so bringing in a professional like me who can maybe couch how that could look while still honoring the autonomy might be a good use of money.
So, how do you decide what's a reasonable risk versus a dangerous one?
Oh God, that's such a good question. I teach a class or I taught a class once at a conference for aging life care managers, and we had this topic discussed, the right to
Mm-hmm.
folly for people with dementia. And when do we interfere with somebody's right to folly? And we ended up hanging our hat on when it hurt other people, such
Mm-hmm.
as driving and hurting somebody. Dr. Bill Thomas, again, the geriatrician, said you have the right to follow as long as you're not hurting other people or you're not literally
Mm-hmm.
endangering yourself. So I had a client
Mm-hmm.
years ago who didn't have any dementia, was a big smoker, smoked in his house, but guess what? Was dying of lung cancer and was smoking while the oxygen tank was on. So that was a danger to himself and to the neighborhood. So I said, do you mind doing me a favor? Because he had capacity and just turning off the oxygen when you smoke. And he laughed and he's like, oh, you don't want me blowing up the neighborhood, huh? And I said, yeah, or your caregivers who are here looking after you. So we
Yeah.
mitigated the harm and he was able, because he didn't have dementia, to agree. But I look at the consequences when I'm thinking about risks. If your mom isn't bathing regularly, what are the risks? Maybe you're embarrassed when you go out with her because there's an odor. Maybe she's in assisted living and nobody's sitting next to her, so there's social being ostracized. But there's also the real
Mm-hmm.
risk of getting a urinary tract infection for a woman who's not bathing regularly or even using wipes and keeping that peri area clean. So
Yeah.
I would say we might need to get someone to assist with bathing. But if they're just not as clean as they used to be, but we're not really running into urinary tract infections and she's in her own home and the smell doesn't bother her, maybe that's a risk we're like, okay. Falling is a huge thing. People are falling a lot, right? Panic
Right.
calls and lots of falls. So if they're at risk for falling, it's really sad when I find out that a client, usually before I get them, has fallen, been on the floor for a number of hours or in a bathtub they couldn't get out of. They're dehydrated. They've broken a bone. They were unable to call for help. That's so hard to hear. So a lot of times I'll
Yes.
work with families about, yes, they're a fall risk in their home. They're probably going to have a risk even if they're institutionalized in assisted living or
Mm-hmm.
skilled nursing. So what can we do to help mitigate the risks of a fall anywhere? And we'll talk about that. But wrapping somebody in bubble wrap, we haven't been able to achieve just yet. One
Yeah.
important thing I want to say too, Dale, when we're looking at the risks is, what are the consequences of cleaning up the mess? What is the cost
Okay.
of the mistake? That can help frame when we intervene. If a person at
Yeah.
80 gets a DUI, that's a big
Mm-hmm.
deal. Not only do they lose their driving privileges, but it costs thousands of dollars to get out of that mess. And how do they get from point A to point B while they can't drive for
Mm-hmm.
until they get their license
Mm-hmm.
back or forever? Guess what? It's usually the family or the spouse cleaning up that mess. So I might
Yeah.
intervene and put a stopgap in that and stop that folly
Hmm.
more than I would the bathing, because the person cleaning up that mess
Hmm.
is impacted and it costs the whole system something, right? The judicial system, or if
Right.
they hurt themselves, they're now in the medical system. It's a high price to pay for, oh, it's okay if he drives or she drives. So
Yeah,
I think looking at the cost of cleanup is something that helps me decide if the risk is worth it. Does that make sense?
it does make sense. Another follow-up question is, are there signs that a senior's autonomy is being limited too much?
I think, yes. I think what I hear from the older adult when I'm there, they'll say that there are too many people interfering in their life. I will see mood
Yeah.
changes. The adult child will say, my dad's really angry all the time. I might see that the person is really withdrawn. We have a term we use called learned helplessness, which is if somebody's doing something for you, you just stop doing it for yourself. And those mood
Yeah.
changes can lead to depression. They get bewildered. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think those are some of the signs I would look for.
What are the emotional consequences when families overmanage a loved one's life?
Well, we talked about the older adult impact, but actually it mostly affects the adult children. They end up feeling really upset and frustrated because their good ideas are being thwarted. They get burned out, they
Yeah.
feel really frustrated, and parents are good at putting up a fight. They want to do what they want to do, and the kids need to know. I think the emotional consequences are more about them because they try so hard to push that
Yeah.
rock up the hill. And I want to just give my adult children permission to not do as much. We're not legally responsible for our parents. There's no law right now that says you must care for your parents. Mostly it's coming from a place, well, to be honest, it might be love, but it also might just be like ethical, moral feeling that you should do something to help them more, but it's never
Yeah.
legal. If you lived in Singapore and your mom lives in Healdsburg, you ain't going to be bedside at the hospital. So pretend you don't even live locally if that helps you to just sort of take a step back, and care for yourself.
Well, how do you coach? How do you coach caregivers to set healthy boundaries while still honoring independence?
When I work with an older adult, I'll ask them what their goals are and what's important to them. So
Yeah.
oftentimes I'll go back to the caregivers and say, this is what your dad told me was important. And that helps reframe.
Hmm.
So it's not about the child's goals, it's about the older adult's goals. And I also talk about looking at quality of life as much as we're looking at safety, because we really want to honor their autonomy. That's what a good care manager does. A good source to try and remind the adult children that the parents' wishes are paramount in our field. They are the client. And just keep your eye on that prize, keep your focus there.
Let's pivot a little bit. Let's pivot to the changing senior care landscape. And I love this question for you because you've
Yeah.
been in this industry for quite a long, long time. So obviously you worked across decades of senior care. What major changes have you seen in the industry?
You know, Sadly, the number one thing I see is greed. I think
Mm,
that people have decided to build these really fancy, beautiful buildings, but there's no good care inside of them.
mm,
And they have tours of the buildings led by people in hospitality with no gerontological training. They're asking questions of the adult children instead of the potential resident. They're talking when the person's behind them and my older adult can't hear them and feels bereft. The
okay.
increased prices, we've made it
Mm,
something just for the very, very wealthy. It used to be that if
mhm,
someone was on supplemental security income, I could find a care home for them and they could have room and board and somebody to help them bathe and give their meds. That's totally gone. And when I was
yeah.
thinking about this podcast, brushing my teeth one day, I thought, my adult children are under the impression that money buys good care. And you know what
Mhm,
money does? It makes the shareholders rich. It does not buy good
mm,
care for your mom. or your dad. And you need to
Mhm.
remember that these buildings are built to look good a lot of times to to the children, not to the potential user who's 88 and moving in. So caring makes good care, not the amount of money that you're paying per month to live at this building.
Noted. Now, why do you often recommend small board and care homes instead of large corporate communities?
I like a small board and care home because there is less turnover in the staff. You might have one or two people,
Mhm.
so they really get to know the residents. The doors are usually open so that the people are coming and going in
Mhm.
and out of them, and the staff member can be like, Jessica's been in the bathroom a really long time, or this is her
Uh,
8th trip to the bathroom. I'm going to check her for a fever. Maybe she has a urinary tract infection. If you're in a huge building and you're behind a closed door and somebody just says, here's your medication, they're not going to know. They're not going to be on top of your symptoms and your changing needs. It's a very independent place, but it's not a very caring place.
mm,
So, yes, it doesn't have happy hour and it doesn't necessarily have a robust activities program, but maybe you can pay a home care
right.
company to bring your parent out into the world to do those fun things, but bring them back to a small, caring, home-like environment.
What should families look for when choosing between the two? Again, the smaller boarding cares versus the larger senior living communities.
I think when you're looking to choose one, the board and care homes, they're also assisted living. They have the same exact
Right.
license. Is how the staff interacts with the existing residents
Hmm.
and asking about their training,
Hmm.
asking about staff turnover. And if you're in a smaller
Hmm.
care home, you probably need a higher acuity of care. So if your mom is super
Hmm.
duper independent, it might be hard for her to go into a small board and care home. But maybe down the line, that's something you'd want to consider. I always ask about staffing ratios and turnover. There are books out there
Yeah.
about all the questions to ask. But for me, I try to look for places that are nonprofit still instead of for profit. They're getting harder to find, but actually, that's sort of what I've been looking for.
That is really hard to find. Are there many area?
There are not many, but there are still some. And one of the first questions when a new place opens up or there's new management is I will dig in to find out who owns them. And if it's family owned, that will make a difference to me because I think there might be an
Yeah.
ability to have a conversation and affect change in the building as opposed to if it's just the corporate, no, we don't do this, no, we don't do that. We own 90 buildings and this is what we do.
Yeah. Very good insights. Now, if you could change one thing about the senior care industry today, what would it be?
I would actually ask that caregivers who are in these buildings be allowed to do a task with an older adult and not just be their
Hmm.
servant. I would ask them to sit and
Hmm.
just visit. Bill Thomas was looking at building the Eden model, which is that if you're sitting down watching Price is Right or Jeopardy with your client, that's actually a value. That resident is actually building rapport and getting something out of that. You don't just have to be doing laundry. And I also would love to see people say, hey, Brenda, it's time for us to set the dinner table. Because I don't think we're used to being
Hmm.
waited on 24 hours a day. I think we're used to doing something. So even if we have diminished mobility or dexterity, there's still a way we can contribute to the community. And I would love to see senior care communities embrace that idea rather than paying all the food service people. Half your people are residents who do the dishes or set out the plate table settings or vacuum because there's still that ability in people. And I just think it would bring more purpose to their lives.
I know you teach a course called Essentials of Care Management.
Yeah.
What motivated you to start teaching it?
You know, it's funny. I was looking at my presentations and I've always been a teacher because this is from 1994, Petaluma Park and Rec. Housing options for seniors, what elders and their
Yeah.
families should know, $10. So I have wanted to get out this knowledge before I die. Because there's no sense I
Yeah.
have it all, right? I want other people to know it.
Yeah.
So I know that we don't have a school of, you can go to gerontology and get a master's degree, but really the nuances of being a care manager are specific that aren't really taught. We don't have a good venue for that. So I wanted to train people in what I do and my method, and then they can work for companies or themselves and find their own method, their own balance.
I mean, just going a little deeper then, who is this course for? And what skills do students walk away with? Is it only for folks that want to do the business?
I get a lot of people who are in home care that are ready to do more and become care managers. So we get people that are already in the healthcare professions, nurses, social
Yeah.
workers, physical therapists, that sort of thing. But also, if you really want to be of service in a caring profession and you need to know some guidelines about, like we talk about how to work with families and have a family meeting that's productive, because you've got a lot of competing family
Yeah.
dynamics when you sit at the table, how to do an in-home assessment of someone's needs, and most importantly, building resources. What's out there in the community that you can be creative with and bring to your client? If you've been doing it a week, you don't know that much. If you've been doing it 50 years, you
Right.
do. So I try to impart to the students
Right.
as many squirrely resources so that they can be creative when developing a good care plan for their clients.
I know you've mentored many professionals. What qualities make a truly great care manager?
I suggest the students do this exercise about what they think. I think for me, what I get complimented on is that I actually answer my phone in 2025. I
Mm,
am responsive.
mm,
Even if I say, I'm so sorry, I'm just heading into a meeting with, someone, I will call you back. Because when that adult daughter calls in the middle of her busy life, she doesn't want voicemail because she doesn't know if you're going to call her back. And she ain't got no time for making 3 more phone calls to reach you. So I think pick up your phone, be responsive, do what you say you're going to do. If you're going to call back in 3 days, call back. Let them know that you heard them,
yeah.
that you are going to be responsive. And also, I think it's important that you stay in your lane and know your scope of practice. I'm not allowed to give financial and legal information or medical information. I need to get people to those resources. But I also need to
Yeah.
say, I don't know, let me get back to you, and then go to my sources in the community
Mhm,
to bring back that expert advice to the families.
mhm.
Those are some of the things I think make a
What advice would you give to someone who's considering a career in geriatric care management?
oh my gosh, we need you. We need you. We
Yeah.
have got to have more people in this profession. If you want to be of service and be in a really unique profession, join us.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Now, looking ahead, what gives you hope about how our society is evolving in the way we view aging?
You're starting to see more positive messages about aging. Ageism is basically the last prejudice
Yeah.
that we tolerate. We don't allow fat shaming. We're trying to be more understanding about the trans community and the LGBT community. We are trying to include minorities more in our messaging, but ageism seems to be something we still tolerate. My sister told me that there was a person who had a birthday at her company and he turned, I want to say 60, and they gave him Depends and they
Okay.
gave him Geritol. We need to get rid of this negative idea that, or of this negativism about getting older. There's too much emphasis on staying young and looking young. And you're starting to see some people say and normalize that the gifts I have of living this long on the planet and being comfortable in my skin is something that I can give the younger generation. I have something to teach. I can teach people, frankly, nowadays, how to have a conversation in person, not just with a phone. I can teach
Wait.
my granddaughter how to cook. I can teach
Yeah.
manners, introduce them
Yeah.
to old time music, which might be from the 70s, right? But I have gifts that I can model and that I can give. And that gives me hope when I see people embracing Yes, I'm 70, 80, 90, 100, but I am still a vibrant human being that really matters.
And lastly, any final words, and how can somebody get a hold of you if they have more questions, about this podcast?
Yeah, the easiest thing is to go to my website. Since I used to do a radio show called Call Kira About Aging, my website is my first name, Kira, Kira, at
Mhm.
callkira.com. Kira at
Perfect.
CALLKIRA.com. You'll see the classes I'm teaching next year. You'll see my book, Tips for Helping Your Aging Parents Without Losing Your Mind. Get a copy of the book on Amazon
Yeah.
or at my website. And certainly, if you want to book a consultation, even an hour, hour and a half can help get a family on the right track right from the beginning. So I'd be happy to speak with people.
Oh, one last question. Another final question. I forgot to do this in the beginning. Where are you based out of, and where do you help people?
That's a good question. I am in a little town called Sebastopol, California, which is in Sonoma County. And I will help people in Sonoma County, Napa, Mendocino, Lake. I like going north on 101. But if people need a care manager in Marin or San Francisco, I certainly have colleagues that I can suggest. And there's a national website for the aging life care professionals,
Yes.
and they can find someone in any town all over the nation. So I'm happy to connect people to whomever they need if my caseload is full or they want Sonoma County.
Thank you for this conversation and for challenging all of us to rethink what it means to care for our loved ones. Your message about the right to follow reminds us that aging is not just about safety, it's about freedom, purpose, and identity. And for those of you watching or listening, if your family is navigating senior living and you're not sure what to do with the parents' home, let's talk. Schedule a free consultation with me at www.simplifyseniortransitions.com. Have a quick question, DM me anytime on Instagram at Soul by Dale. If you found this episode helpful, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more families find this show. And don't forget to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for tuning in. And one last thank you to Kira for being on the episode with me today. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And for the rest of you, I'll see you on the next episode of the Simplify Senior Transitions podcast.